Warm Pacific greetings and hello everyone and welcome to today's session. Thank you for taking time to attend our webinar. I hope you're all hearing me well. A recorded version of this webinar will be available and sent out in next week's Pacific Pulse newsletter, which is from the SPTO, from the Pacific Tourism Organization. It will also be shared on our social platforms on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. If you haven't, please do follow us on social media to receive regular updates from the Pacific Tourism Organizations. The links will be posted in chat. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions for our presenter, there will be time for Q&A at the end of his presentation. Alternatively, you can always reach out to me via email, and I will post my email address in chat. And for those who are just joining us in now, welcome. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Mr. Danny Cohanpour. Danny is Trove Tourism CEO and founder, focused on digital strategy and marketing for tourism organizations. Danny's background is in digital strategy, having worked with some of the world's largest government agencies on new digital platforms, analytical tools, and training programs. At Trove, Danny leads a team of consultants, associates, and advisors to help destinations stand out. So without further ado, over to you, Danny.
Thank you, Atama. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I know depending on where you are in the world, it's either evening or morning, but morning for most of you. So I appreciate you taking the time in the middle of the day or in the morning as you're getting up. So thank you. And thank you, Atama, for having me. I'm Danny, as Atama mentioned. I'm CEO of Trove. Today, I'm going to walk you through what is really a presentation, but ultimately a conversation, because I would definitely like to hear from you. And I want to see questions. And I really, the most important part for me is being able to talk to all of you that run or are part of tourism organizations at this point in time, which, you know, it's constantly being said that it's challenging, it's challenging. This is the most challenging time for the tourism industry ever. And I know that whether if you're an operator, a DMC, a tourism authority, a DMO, if you run a tourism product or a tour company, whatever it is difficult. It is a very difficult time. So I want to treat this more of a conversation and provide you some insights that we've been able to aggregate here at Trove about some real tips and tricks about what any tourism organization can do, small or large, to move the needle a bit in enticing and attracting that 2022 consumer. So that's what our presentation is about today. We call it 5 digital steps to help destinations stand out as the world begins to recover and reopen. What are 5 things that you can do and that we do here at Trove, where we work with tourism organizations to really be able to move the needle on once you're reopening, once you're recovering, how are you bringing in and attracting that visitor? So again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and I will stop midway through the presentation for any questions as well. All right, so today's agenda: what is Trove? And then we introduce you to our approach here at Trove, which is called the ARDIM approach, and I'll define exactly what that is, because it's an acronym that means its component parts. Third is what are the components of our approach, and then fourth is just more information about Trove and how you can reach us and how we can start a conversation. All right, goal for today: we want to share with you our method for helping destinations recover, rebound, and stand out. So what is Trove? You're probably saying, who's this guy with a New York accent dialing in weirdly from Chicago and not New York today? I'll tell you, Trove is a digital strategy and marketing agency. We are based in New York. We have some teammates in London as well. What we do is really bring digital and innovation to tourism organizations for tourism development. So we work with DMOs, tourism boards, tourism authorities, and tour operators on achieving visitor growth results with smart branding, marketing, strategy, and analytics tools. We understand that often the connotation with digital is $1 million projects or $5 million projects. What we found at Trove is regardless of the size of your organization, there are tips and tricks and techniques that you can use even at small organizations that really catalyze and propel the impact that you can make in terms of your marketing operation. And we're going to talk about a few of them in a second. And on the right here, you'll see some of our teammates in New York. Here's our team. We have a mix of both regional expertise and also functional expertise. So Trove is really a mixture of two sub-teams. The first sub-team focuses on digital marketing and branding for destinations. So that's branding strategy, social, influencer media, and analytics on the marketing side. The second side is tourism development consulting. So we do investment planning, investment research, and investment strategy, as well as we work with tourism boards on master planning as well. So there's two sides of Trove. Today, we're really going to stick with our marketing tips and tricks. Who do we work with? So I mentioned this already, tourism authorities, tourism boards and DMOs, and operators and DMCs as well, small or large. So I think what's interesting here is we've established ourselves in a niche, if you will, as a digital firm for tourism development. That's really what we do. My background is in working on digital platforms and digital strategies for some of the largest government agencies, and working in government kind of teaches you what you have to know about how to maneuver within often bureaucratic systems. I think tourism, especially now, it's so important to look at how are you applying digital smartly and how are you applying digital for maximum impact. You don't need to spend millions of dollars to get impact. You can see it in small ways. We've developed 5 products at Trove. I'm not going to bore you with descriptions. I'm going to demo one of them later and describe them in more detail later on. But the 5 products are Trove Discovery, which is our digital strategy tool. It helps a tourism board or a tour operator be able to really pin down what their strategy roadmap looks like virtually. What we heard from DMOs and some of the tourism organizations that we work with was COVID was difficult because we couldn't get everybody in a room, right? People couldn't be in a room. We couldn't develop our strategy, our 1-year, 5-year strategy. We had no idea what to do next. We developed a virtual strategy roadmap that helps tourism organizations do just that. Trove Sentiment is our in-house sentiment analysis tool. We're going to be talking about it in more detail later on. Trove Traveler is the way that we do market segmentation here at Trove. Trove Influence is our influencer matchmaking tool. So if you're a tourism organization, we help match you with the right fit influencer to help you with a specific post or campaign. And then Trove Trends. This is our analytics tool that whether you're a small organization or you're a large organization, it pulls in all of your data in one view in real time. So you're able to see your performance, especially now that's so critical. What is your performance and what's the outlook for the next 6 months? So that is covered in Trove Trends. Also on the digital side, you'll see on the right, we are a partner of Travel Tech, and we're also an expert hub partner of City Nation Place. For those of you that have heard of City Nation Place, great organization, and we are a part of both. Here are some of our case studies. First case study we've worked with, I'll just give you an example, is in Dubai. You know, one thing that's so interesting about Dubai as a destination is when you think about Dubai, you often will think about Burj Khalifa and the shopping mall and that kind of luxury segment. We came in and we're supporting Dubai on some of its cultural and historical segments and products. So how do you move the needle and be able to highlight and attract visitors either on the trade side or on the independent consumer side to some of those more cultural and historical tourism attractions, museums, and centers within Dubai itself? So that's a really interesting project that I'll talk more about. And second one is we worked with the Siem Reap based tourism organization that had something similar where they found pre-corona, pre-pandemic, a lot of their tourism was going to, I think, somewhere that we all know, the Angkor Wat. We were able to work with the organization to diversify a bit and be able to pull a little bit more attention around markets and then some of its wilderness preserves and hikes and nature-based products as well. So that was an awesome project that I'll talk about later as well. All right, so here we get to the nitty-gritty, and I'll give you an overview of our research, and then I'll open it up for questions. We did research earlier this year on what 2022 will look like, because you're all here on the phone. We're all, and whether you are a small one-person operator, whether you are a marketing director at a DMO, right? We've all seen difficulties in the last 16 to 18 months. So we did some research and we did a survey of 50 tourism boards, and we also took a sample of about 3,000 travelers, and we aligned on 5 common themes. So you'll see them on this screen. The top of the screen talks about some of the research and findings that we had on traveler behavior, and the bottom is how we've seen destinations respond to that shift. So on the top, I'll just walk you through the 5 things that we've noticed. First is if it's safe, they won't try it. If it's not safe, they won't try it. Meaning, if it's not communicated specifically the safety, hygiene, health, and certainty that they will be safe and healthy post-trip or during trip, they won't try it. The majority of consumers will not try it. We've also noticed that demand is shifting. So typically, prior, when we were analyzing the industry, we saw demand shift really every 4 to 6 months. We're seeing demand shift monthly now. So things like staples like Dubai Expo, which is the largest business conference in the world, we're seeing a lot of tourists that are going there. Their demand for what to do in Dubai, for example, has completely shifted based on where it was 2 months ago. So we've seen demand shift more quickly and rapidly than ever before in terms of what consumers are looking for in their first trip out of the country, or their first trip regionally post-corona, or their second trip regionally post-corona. That's what we're doing. Personalization is key. So we've seen a trend of having to personalize your marketing or your products on offer to the specific visitor and to the specific segment that you're looking at. 4 is, we call it mobile. So I'm talking about consumer tourism now, has really focused predominantly on the mobile phone. So whether you are finding out about a destination or a new attraction on your phone or via social or via an influencer post or an organic post, whether you are booking a trip, okay, whether you're planning a trip, whether you are sharing about a trip, whether you are sharing your trip with friends, everything is now done, or mostly done, on the mobile phone. So it's about shifting your attitude a bit and shifting the way that you approach a marketing strategy. And then 5th is that travelers are very saturated. And I found this interesting. Travelers are very saturated by options on where to go first. So where are you going to go on your first trip? I know that we're also limited because some destinations have not even opened yet. Most destinations have not opened their borders for international travel yet. Some are. And some are slowly putting their recovery plans and reopening plans on the horizon. But even still, travelers don't know where to go. If they're booking a trip 6 months in advance, there is significant amount more research and planning done now than ever before. So destinations can meet these needs in 5 ways. And these 5 ways are the anchor of the approach that we're going to talk through in a sec. The first is sentiment analysis. So if you are somebody on this call, if you are a tour operator in Vanuatu, or if you represent tourism authority in Fiji, whoever you are on this call right now, I know we have a really diverse set of folks across the Pacific. Being able to do some sort of analysis about what the voice of the visitor says at any given time is important. And there are ways to do it inexpensively. And there are ways to do it without a lot of manual work. And it's really critical, and we'll talk about why it's critical in a second. Second is resegmenting your market. So what we found in working with destinations, for example, in Asia, is that what the segmentation that may have worked 18 months ago is definitely not relevant now. And their priority segments from 6 months ago are not relevant now. we're finding that segments, because demand is constantly shifting, we're finding that audiences or audience profiles are shifting as well. So if 6 months ago, your active traveler from the States that's 25 to 34 years old that wants to travel to Fiji to go to Vanuatu, maybe that was the case 6 months ago, it might not be the case now. And there are ways to do segmentation to make sure that your marketing is always attuned to what is out there in terms of segments and where people want to go and what their interests are. Number 3 is prioritizing the right products. So being able to look at your market segments and saying, okay, let's prioritize the right place and the right products and the right maybe tours if you're a tour operator for somebody to go to or for groups of people to go to. Number 4 is investing in the right influencer. So we see time and time again, hundreds of thousands of dollars, even thousands of dollars spent on an influencer because there's this idea that influencers, if left to their own devices, will lead to X percentage more social engagement, which will lead to Y percentage more visitors. What we've seen, especially in the last 18 months, influencers are holding their breath for work, okay? Influencers want to work in travel. There has not been a travel industry or supply for influencers in the last 18 months. So it's not about putting the millions of dollars into a campaign. It's not about getting the flashiest amount of followers. What we found it's about is identifying the right fit of influence of both where the traveler is coming from and what the destination is. And we'll talk about that as our 4th point. And 5th is around analytics. So we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but because demands are changing so much and because travelers are saturated with all these competitive opportunities, how are you able to track that in real time and be able to respond to it in real time? So this is what our research has shown us. And this brings us to our approach called the 5-step method, ARDIM. And I'll define exactly what that stands for in the next section. Before we do, I did want to open it up for questions. Before we talk about our approach and talk about some of our tools and what we've done, I'd love to open it up for any questions any of you have. I'm an open book and I'm from New York, so I really love conversation and I often talk too much. So feel free to go off mute or ask the question in the chat and Atama can relay it over to me. Thanks.
Hello.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Talofa from Samoa. Thank you very much. I had a question for you. Over here in the South Pacific, we're extremely privileged. Well, in Samoa, we have not yet had a case of COVID. So my question to you is, we want to, I guess, in the future, use that as a marketing tool. Which doesn't come across as being not careful enough that we want tourism before we want to keep our people safe. But how would we use that to our advantage overseas? Is it something that's appealing to the overseas market, looking at possibly the Pacific once COVID numbers go down? Or how do we use this to our advantage?
Elizabeth, if I can ask a question to you before I answer you, just for more clarity, historically, what's been your target market? So geographically, where have they normally come from and what are their age? You can give me a ballpark.
So here in Samoa, I guess, so New Zealand, Australasia, New Zealand, Australia, then and parts of the other parts of Northern Hemisphere, I guess, would have been more the younger, maybe honeymoon market.
Got it.
We're probably, in terms of our awareness prior to COVID, we're a smaller destination compared to bigger, well-known Pacific islands like Fiji, Islands, Vanuatu, Hawaii, etc. So we're sort of like a little niche destination, but
that's okay. I mean, I've never been there. I have been to Vanuatu. I've been to Fiji, New Zealand. I've never been there. What I will say, so, and quick question, in addition to that, do you find that New Zealanders are booking their trips usually pre-COVID via a travel agent or some sort of organized body, or are they just going onto an OTA? What's the normal route?
10 years ago, everyone came through an agent. Probably in the last 5 years, there was definitely a shift for people to just book online or even come to us directly. We'll see how that pans out. Post COVID, I'm not really sure what will happen like moving forward, but I would still say there was a split mix of online, those that want to do it independently, and then those that still want to go through their travel agent.
So thank you. What I would recommend, and we could definitely talk, and we've actually done some writing about this. In 3 to 4 months, a lot of the world is going to be at the same baseline level, meaning depending on the government's vaccination rates and or their border limitations. So, hey, we can only allow folks that have a vaccine to enter our borders, and or, hey, we need somebody, we need to do a test within 72 hours of traveling. If your branding strategy is just riding on 0% community transmission, it doesn't work. So what we found is often, and you've probably already thought this through, but it's a solid communication campaign where that's a component of it, and you're focusing instead on the fact that you have been able to maintain the health and maintenance of your population during the last 18 months, and you have no community transmission, and you don't intend to have any more community transmission because of X or Y rule to enter the border. I'd also recommend looking at your products that are more focused around outdoor activities, remote activities. This is what the Australian, New Zealand, and US and Canadian traveler are looking for at this stage, especially in the next 6 to 8 months, is what are the outdoor and remote activities that won't get me in the middle of a hustle and bustle. And I don't think Samoa is a hustle and bustle, but I know it still has some more urban centers than others. But if you'd like, we could definitely kind of work through what that messaging is and what some of the priority messaging would be. That's what we've seen in the past. So, but for the specific Samoa case, I'd love to talk more, Elizabeth, with you on how we could position it and what would work specifically for you. And also, it's about making the pitch to trade, but also to independent consumer, and how to make that a different pitch. So.
Thank you very much. We definitely have a lot of wide open spaces here in Polynesia and definitely Samoa. So we will look into that more. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Angela.
Aloha from Hawaii.
Hi.
I'm very interested in you had mentioned that resident sentiment is very important. That was the first thing that you listed in your list.
Yep.
And I wanted to, well, here in Hawaii, after the pandemic happened, resident sentiments about tourism has been significantly impacted, and there are there's a lot more resistance against tourism now, and there's quite a lot of tension around tourism. And I was curious how you're experiencing that in other destinations and how that's affecting your marketing strategies.
I will be 100% honest with you. I have not seen that to the same intensity. I have not seen the resistance that I've seen in Hawaii to the same intensity as I have in any other destination right now. Not that the intensity is not there, but I do know that Hawaii is a specific use case where just recently, I think on one of the islands, the authority came out and said, hey, we need to restrict travel. I forgot which island it was to, for a specific period of time. So I do know that sentiment has gotten bad, both on an environmental and ecological degradation standpoint, but also on a COVID standpoint, right? So we've seen it in the past. What we do at Trove, we do sentiment analysis not only for visitors, but for residents as well, to be able to tell, you know, what are major themes, what are conversations they're having, where are they having them in Hawaii? And this is all, it's called social listening. So we're able to really look at Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, blogs, and be able to dissect that data in real time. And we're able to tell you trends and things like that. So maybe in certain geographic locations in Hawaii, it's a little bit more welcoming to the concept of bringing in tourists or visitors later down the line, maybe around specific events. So we do have the ability to do that. I've seen similar type sentiment in some parts of Southeast Asia as well. You know, we work in Cambodia, for example. We've seen similar sentiment there, and other countries in Southeast Asia that historically have been very open to tourism, but have had a lull in the last 16, 18 months. And you know, we've worked on combating that a bit with some of our marketing strategies. So we can definitely talk through it. I would recommend some sort of method for tracking sentiment. And I don't know if you guys do that, Angela, yet. It doesn't have to be a $1,000 tool. It could be something simple, but there are ways to do that that give you granular insights at a geographic and demographic level. So would love to talk more. I can do a demo of one of our tools if you'd like, and we can take a look at that.
Thank you.
Hi,
Cool.
Danny. There's a question from George in the chat. Is COVID travel insurance cover a major consideration for travel?
Yes, insurance is a major, so both the authorities' communication around health and safety and hygiene is important. It's not number one most important. I think it was number 2 or number 3 in the survey that we administered to 3,000 travelers. And insurance coverage is important. I have to check specifically at the survey results, but we found that that is important as well. I can check and get back to you, George, on that, but we have seen conversation around that and themes around that, especially from travelers in the US, Canada, and North America, as well as Western Europe as well, that have traditionally, they haven't really seen something like this before, and they want to insure their trip. So we could talk more about it. And I'll get back to you on the specific survey result. I forgot what it was.
How often does your team do these surveys and research?
So we do another white paper every 2 weeks, and for folks on the line, we could send you that white paper as part of our newsletter. We do our research. We have a few in-house databases at Trove. We do consistent sentiment research on some of our priority markets as well. And we also are constantly writing. So we're writing a blog every week. Only reason, Angela, I knew a bit about the Hawaii case that you mentioned is one of our analysts who's actually focused on sustainable tourism, wrote a long blog about Hawaii and sustainable tourism and Hawaiian resident reception. And I think it's a very interesting use case that I don't think is permanent. But yeah, so it's constant. And that's really at the cornerstone of our firm. So thanks, Atama. That's a good question. Great. All right, I want to talk with you what the method is. It's called ARDIM. And before I tell you what it stands for, here's 2 of my London-based consultants on the left. ARDIM method for developing tourism troves. You probably ask yourself, what is a trove? Okay, I've never heard of trove before. I may have heard like a trove of bees or whatever it is, but trove means treasure. We like helping a destination find their treasure. So whether it's Samoa, finding your right brand or messaging that will really take you from A to B, or if it's Hawaii, is how do you really develop a solid communication campaign that works for residents and visitors? Whatever it is, we love to help with identifying a gem of a product, be able to develop that product, be able to develop marketing around that product. So that's really been key for us. We've worked with DMOs, DMCs, tour operators, and tourism authorities, but we also understand that you guys deal with marketing and product challenges every day. There are 5 steps in ARDIM that we've seen lay out solid blueprints for destinations that are reopening. Some of these 5 steps may include things you already do. I understand that some of your organizations are more advanced than others, right? There are things that you probably already do. There are ways to create demand more simply and more efficiently, and that's what we do here at Trove. So here's the 5 steps involved in the process. ARDIM, analyze, research, discover, influence, and measure. We use these 5 steps for every project, for every engagement with a tourism organization. any variation of it usually, but these are the 5 steps. So it's analyze is around sentiment, okay? And we'll talk more about that on the next slide. Research is around our market segmentation and how we do that and how we do it continuously. Discover is how do you prioritize the right products, okay? Whether you're a small operator or a large DMO, is how do you prioritize the right products for your marketing? Influence is our approach to using and managing and analyzing the impact of an influencer, whether it be a media or TV influencer or a social or a digital influencer that you've enlisted to help you with your tourism campaign. How do we help there? And what are some tips and tricks for you for step 4? And then step 5 is measure. So how are you doing analytics? I know some tourism organizations that don't do analytics at all, right? You run social and you have somebody that posts on your social, but you don't measure engagement. It's often more difficult to do that in the medium and long term than it is to run a social with just somebody doing it, because you're never going to see any traction. So we're going to talk about overall what it means to measure and how we do measurement. And I'll show you a demo of one of our dashboards here at Trove. So this is the ARDIM method. Here's the steps. So step 1 is to analyze. Okay, so we talked about sentiment analysis. We have a tool that we use where we're running reports constantly in real time about what are the conversations around sentiment. So a little bit of blurb up here. It's really critical for a destination, whether you're a tourism authority, a DMO, DMC, or a tour operator, to have a specific way of generating insights from the wealth of data online about traveler sentiment. So in the last 18 months, there's been data and conversations that have been layered on top of each other and layered on top of each other all over the world about where people want to travel to, what they think about a specific destination, what they think about the destination's marketing, where they want to go, specific on the product level as well. So what tourism products, what attractions, what entertainment centers, what events they want to go to. Things like that are all online because it's been brewing for the last 18 months. So we really do 3 types here at Trove. The first is a corporate brand analysis. So this really only applies to if you're a tour operator, okay, or a DMC, and you would like to understand, how has the brand presence changed over time? How has online sentiment changed over time? Who is talking about your firm or your agency and about what? And what destinations are being talked about more than others? And how do you identify comparative trends in regards to that? Number 2 is comparing attractions and destinations. So we're able to say, okay, we mentioned the Samoa case. How is sentiment of Samoa geographically around the world? How is that different than maybe sentiment around Marshall Islands? I'm using that as an example. And I don't think you would ever compare them. It's the first thing that came to my head. So comparative footprint. So how is sentiment different? What are common themes and conversations? Positive or negative conversations, and how has that changed over time, and where is it right now? So we're able to do some of that comparative analysis, and we're able to also see at the tour level or maybe a specific attraction or a place to go level, how has demand changed geographically over time as well. And then the last, which is often most important for the folks on the phone here, is destination analysis. So what is sentiment around travel and tourism to a destination, a specific destination, okay? This is where we've seen a lot of insights on who is talking about travel to your destination. What are the conversations about? Okay, are they positive or negative? Who is influencing the conversations? And what are the conversations? Where are the conversations coming from about your destination? And what are they talking about? And how has that changed over time? So the analysis is important. And then we also put it together in a weekly strategic report to tell you, hey, based on the insights, we'd recommend you look at this target segment, or maybe dial down your communication about maybe a specific event because it's not a specific market is not responding well to it. Whatever it is, we're able to extract details like that with the models. A few of them we've just developed. Some of them we've had for a while, and they're able to really give you some great insights on sentiment. That's number 1. Step 2 is research. So, all right, once you do your sentiment analysis, we find that a market segmentation is really critical. So most important step that a tourism organization, in my opinion, can take at this stage, if you have not already, is defining your segments at this stage. What are your segments in September or soon to be October 2021 look like? This includes capturing both quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative and qualitative data are important to aligning on a segment. So really, we have a process we use here at Trove that it's obviously a little bit more deeper and advanced if we're to tell you what we've done for any of the destinations we've worked with. First is decide what's already there. So what literature is out there that has segmented your market already, what's historically been done. The second is collecting some of your quantitative data. So this is in the form of travel trend data. So what have travel trends looked like prior to the start of the coronavirus pandemic? What has it been during the pandemic, if you've had any travel at all in spurts of time? And we also have a few databases that we use here at Trove that we have access to. So it doesn't only have to be public travel trend data. It's really important in this data to get a sense of spending patterns, demographics, geographic points of origin, so where are people coming from historically, and maybe in the last month to a quarter or 6 months. And then what's the intent to visit? Is it business travel? Is it leisure travel, et cetera? So that's first. The second step is collecting your quantitative data. Third is collecting qualitative data. This can be as small scope or large scope as you want. It can be a survey that you do. It can be a focus group that you do virtually or in person. We recommend virtually. It could be, we do something at Trove called mobile ethnography, which essentially we use a chatbot tool that sends prospective travelers questions about your destination and gets responses to them. And that's how we build our market segmentation. So there's things that you can do that will get you that qualitative data, but it's not one or the other. You need both quantitative travel data and qualitative behavioral data to produce a market segmentation. Fourth is you're analyzing the data. So you're looking at groupings. So what are different groupings of travelers? Fifth is you're formalizing your segmentation. And then sixth is you're using that segmentation to start to develop a brand. Okay, so what's your messaging going to look like for each segment? What is the unique need of each segment? And what are their preferences? What are they looking for right now? So that's step number 2. That's research, the R in ARDIM. D is discover. So this is something that you all do probably day in and day out. It's something that we do a little bit differently at Trove, is strategy. Okay, so we say it in the top here. Prioritizing 2 to 5 products, a handful of products, is key to any size organization, small or large. Travelers are constantly being overwhelmed by information. So operators need to know what products to prioritize, and tourism authorities need to know which products to prioritize in their marketing. So at Trove, we do virtual strategy workshops that I mentioned, where we use some of our templates, and we've developed a set of strategy workshops, roadmaps, really cool workshops that are actually moving the needle for some of our current partners on aligning on products and aligning on which attractions or which tours they would like to highlight in their marketing first and foremost as they reopen. Number 2, we do in-person workshops, which has been less relevant in the last 18 months, but still relevant. And then third is some of our outcomes. So we have looked at and we've seen the ability to prioritize new tourism products for your marketing. So it may be the same set of tours or destinations that you've traditionally marketed. It could be different ones. It could be a different priority of them. But we have a set of activities that we use at Trove that we find to be really helpful in building a marketing strategy and identifying what products to highlight. Step 4 is influence. Okay, what we have found is that followers are the least important KPI when engaging an influencer, least important. And the campaigns that we've managed, the campaigns that I've managed in the past have failed if that's our sole KPI of how many followers does the social influencer have, how many followers are they giving us. What we found is that influence is in 2 ways is a lot more manageable. The first is what is their presence and influence in the travelers origin market, right? So what is the actual influence and where the traveler is coming from. And then what is the influence in the destination? So by influence, I mean, how much have they worked in that destination and how much have they worked in the place they're coming from? They need to have notoriety, notability in these places. They need to have done a similar campaign before, because organizations are cash strapped. The budgets are not high. Picking the right influencer is 75% of the battle if you're going to be doing a social media campaign. So, you know, part of our survey to tourism boards was, what difficulty have you had with influencers? And 60% of respondents said they have a high degree of difficulty identifying the right influencer to partner with, which we found fascinating. Okay, so 3 things: followers don't matter. Campaigns don't have to be broad or pricey. Campaigns can be 5 posts. You can do 1 post. It's about the effectiveness of that post and being able to allow the influencer freedom, creative freedom, to replicate what has worked before. And third is measuring that engagement. So that's often most important step. We have at Trove 500 influencers that are in our network that we are able to apply to any engagement. So some of them are smaller. Some of them have social media profiles with 20,000, 25,000 followers. Some of them are larger. It depends on what the origin of travel is and what the destination is, and how much influence they have in both those places. So that's step 4. Now, step 5, which I'll show you a demo about, and then we'll open it up for questions. Step 5 is measure. I know there's a lot of data out there, and often it gets overwhelming. So if you're a tourism organization, you live, breathe travel and the success of your business or organization every day. Okay, and I know that. And I used to run a small tour company. I understand how difficult it was back then. It's even more difficult now. We get data so much. We get so many streams of data around your marketing, your web presence. I know you all probably hear the word SEO constantly on how are you ranking on Google, right? Your sentiment is something we mentioned. How are your social accounts performing? How's your Instagram performing? Facebook, how do you measure that? So there's a lot of data out there. What we have been able to do at Trove, and what we recommend to partners, even if they don't work with Trove, right, is to develop a one view of all of your analytics. It's easier said than done. It requires some upfront thinking on what your strategy is and where you're getting the data from, which is most important. But we've done this at Trove, and we have a dashboard that we use at Trove that pulls all your data together and is able to give you a real-time view and a one view of your data and all data that's relevant to your organization. So that's step 5, measure. I'll show you, and I know I didn't do a demo for each, but I'll show you the Trove trends or measurement dashboard that we have been able to roll out. Now, we call it a destination one view dashboard. Atama, you see my screen, right? You see the dashboard and not something else?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you didn't see a picture of my family, which you see on the other screen. Trove trends. So this is the overview page where you're able to see some key KPIs. I want to put your attention on these 6 categories. So Trove Trends is a one view dashboard. So let's say you're a tour operator, let's say you're a DMC or you're a teammate in a DMC, or you are a tourism board or a DMO, or whoever you are within the travel industry. We found that these 6 categories are most important in terms of the data that you're capturing and the data that you need to measure your performance. Number 1 is brand sentiment. So that means brand health. So it means, what are folks saying about your destination internationally, regionally, and locally? Second is website and SEO. So your classic, what are some really key measures on a web and SEO basis, and how are you ranking? Because ranking is often extremely important, specifically when a traveler is researching where to go. If they're starting from scratch, they want to know where to go. Number 3 is social accounts. How are your social accounts measuring on an engagement standpoint? 4th is digital ads. So what's your return on investment on some of your ads? 5th is visitors and spend. So what does your inbound travel look like and spend look like? And 6th is traveler review. So what is TripAdvisor? We only track TripAdvisor right now, but what is your TripAdvisor review saying? whether on an operator level or on a destination level. So these are 6 steps. You're able to filter by date as well, and country and age and gender and all that. The front page is an overview page of all of those 6 categories that I mentioned. And then you can go one by one through this visitor journey that we've established, going from brand perception to traveler review. So we have some KPIs here around sentiment. And again, we're able to pull in hundreds of data points. It's not only the ones that are listed here, but these were what we found to be most important. So we're able to look at where conversations are taking place, what are those conversations, and what's the share of sentiment and sentiment changing over time, as well as some other data points. Website and SEO, so what are some key metrics in regards to your traffic, demography, top visited pages, top visited restaurants, hotels, entertainment centers. We're also able to look at social accounts. So how are your social accounts doing right now? And then you could also filter by over time. So we track Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter in real time as well. Digital ads. So what's your return on investment been like on some of your digital ads, and how has that been distributed regionally as well? Visitor and spend, which is often the most important to see comparatives, is your arrival numbers, expenditure, age and origin, all those kind of KPIs that are critical for a destination to know. And then traveler reviews. So TripAdvisor ratings, daily rating trends, reviews, and where the traveler's coming from as well. So this is our Trove Trends demo. And this represents really our 5th step for any tourism organization that wants to measure. We've been able to identify that a one view of all of your data is critical. So that's step 5, measure. But we also understand, we just went through step 1 to 5 of the approach. Every tourism organization is different and has different priorities, and using tools doesn't have to be millions of dollars, right? And this is something I was speaking to Atama about. Implementing digital within your organization, whether you've already done it or not, doesn't have to cost millions of dollars. It can be quick, simple, inexpensive, and easy to implement concepts and tools that will help your organization and help you with your reopening and recovery plans. So that's a picture of me and one of our teammates. All right, before we go more on Trove, I'd like to open it up for questions. So I'd love to hear from all of you. And as you do that, I will plug in my laptop, which deplugged as we were talking. That's why I dimmed a little bit. But I'm open to answering whatever questions you all have for me. Atama, you might be on mute. I don't know if you wanted to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I know. I just want to let everyone know if you have any questions for. Oh, we have Jackie.
I think Jackie has one.
Yep.
Oh, hi, Danny. Thanks so much for your talk. It's been really interesting. I guess my biggest burning question is, what is the you're saying how important trends are, and absolutely we're seeing travel trends worldwide change so much, and I completely agree with you. But where's the crystal ball? How do you do that research? I mean, is it surveys and that sort of thing that's the most the easiest way to do it, or is there a tool online somewhere that we can find that out, or is it about just monitoring social media?
It depends what trends you're looking at, right? I would classify trends to be in 2 buckets. The first is what are folks saying, and the second is what are the tickets and flights saying, right? So there are tools within our ecosystem that we have access to just because we pay for them that give you those insights, but there are also less expensive databases that have those insights. But I think that trends are best diluted down to 2 things. The first is measuring sentiment, because it is cheaper than a survey. Surveys are expensive and manual and take a long time. Sentiment analysis is cheaper, inexpensive, and a lot faster. And you can identify trends in real time if you have the right analysis on top of it. So you're able to see what are consumers looking for and where are they and what are they talking about. On the flip side is I do think it's important for any size organization to have an accurate view of what are the travel and travel trends inbound into their destination. So country, let's say, right? And how has it changed over time? What are the specific data points on things like reason for trip, usually publicly available, point of origin, usually publicly available, length of trip, sometime publicly available, things like that. So I'd recommend bucketing it in those two ways. And if you'd like, Jackie, we can talk about specifically for you. I don't know, where are you dialing in from?
So I'm actually sitting in Sydney, but we operate
Amazing.
a cruise ship in Fiji. We do 3 to 11 night cruises around the islands, and you know,
That sounds incredible.
But we have no arrivals to monitor right now, and haven't done for 2 years.
No, but you will, and you have before COVID,
Sure.
right? But so then maybe the first bucket is most important, right? But I do think it's a really solid question. That's where we've seen the most trends. That's where we publish the most trends as well. And it just depends on the organization, but it sits in those two buckets.
Great, thanks.
I want to go on a cruise in Fiji, so.
Me too. I've booked for April. I'm hoping.
No, my favorite trip of all time spent few months in Fiji on Navini Island, and I had the best time of my life with no air conditioner and no Wi-Fi, and it was like an amazing trip I was telling Atama about, but I won't bore you to death on that. Any other questions? Angela, I see you have a question.
Oh, sorry. I really enjoyed the part of your presentation on the dashboard.
Yep.
So I just wanted to clarify, do you do this with tourism organizations?
Yes. And I could give you a few use cases posts. I can send you a few use cases of when we have, but we essentially have our dashboard, and then we start working with an organization and we configure it to them, right? So this has some key data points on here already, about 45 data points on here already, but we understand that every organization is different. So we're able to tailor it to your organization and pull maybe from a few data sources that you already have access to, a few that we have access to. So this is essentially the starting place, and then we configure it based on the organization.
So we developed an app for agritourism in Hawaii, and we haven't really been monitoring we need to do some analysis of who's using it and what the trends are. So I was very curious about that. So you would take the data points and provide it to the organization.
We would set everything up. So you would meet with 2 of our analytics specialists on my team and myself. And then we would set everything up, and then you would have access to the real-time dashboard, and you would have weekly reports from us with recommendations. So it's not only the graphs and the one view, it's the reports that we give you about what are Hawaiians saying or whatever it is about the app or whatever it is. So it's both, but we do all the setup for you. We just need to understand what the data sources are. Some of them we may have already, which we do. Some of them you may have, but it takes about usually 3 to 4 weeks, depending on some of those initial conversations.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Tony.
Yeah, Danny. Hi, Tony from Japan. Thanks very much for an interesting presentation. My question is, you talk about, and a lot of people are talking about the rapid changes in trends. You talked about trends changing monthly. I guess we're talking about behavior, really, changes in behavior, aren't we, when we talk about changes in trends? My question is this, though, scientists talk about reverting to mean, which means when you drop a stone in the water, there's a big splash, but the water settles down and it looks 5 minutes later, it looks exactly the same as it did before you dropped the rock in it. So everyone's kind of running around changing their strategies, and because everyone thinks we're on a different planet all of a sudden. and that Homo sapiens in 18 months has become a different species. But is that really true? And, you know, a lot of people who are making enormous changes to the way they plan to do things going to find that they need to actually just change back again in 2 years' time? What do you think?
So I would say there are micro and macro trends. Micro being things like health and safety. So micro being more short-term trends, macro being behaviors that have shifted. So micro being things like health and safety, micro being, you know, we spoke about earlier, some resistance to travel, micro being events and, you know, thinking around maybe Olympics or focused around specific events. Macro, when we look at behaviors changing, I very rarely would recommend, you know, analyzing that and gaining insights on that on a month-to-month level, because it doesn't often work. Like behaviors such as, hey, you know, this segment is more interested in adventure tourism than they may have ever been before. You know, that's not something you can measure on a month-to-month level. It requires maybe 4 to 6 months of changes. So it depends on the key performance. It depends on what metric you're looking at, right? But, you know, we've seen some quick win trends and some trends that are more short-term, and we've seen longer-term trends. It just depends on if it's more of a micro trend, more of a macro behavioral trend. Yeah, so I'd love to dig into more of the specific types of trends you're talking about, but I think it's a really valid question. It's important to not kind of be trigger happy when it comes to sending something to your marketing team or your marketing analyst of, hey, oh, I saw this, because that may change over time. It just depends on what the metric is.
Great, thanks very much.
No problem.
We have a question in chat from Petero regarding on insurance again from before. Is insurance coverage impacted if Pacific Island nations decide to close their borders again if a community outbreak occurs after opening its borders?
I know that trend in other places in the world. I don't know what it is in Pacific Island for Pacific Island travel. I'll have to get back to you on that. So, Tamo, we can track that question. I'll circle back on that. And who asked that question?
Petero.
Wonderful. We'll circle back on that.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Danny? Please do.
If not, I do. I mean, I open any questions. Maybe the things I'm about to say will prompt more questions. 3 things in terms of next steps. Number 1 is I'm available to chat whenever you want. I quite literally am always available. And I believe you can reach me really only in my email, but if you want, we could talk in other ways you could reach me. But I'm very accessible, and I'm very accessible to my team. I'm very accessible to folks on the phone. So I'd love to, I mean, some of the folks that asked questions I thought were great. Other folks on the line, I'd love to talk about your specific use case, and anybody, I'd love to have a conversation, usually pull in 2 of my teammates as well, just to have a casual conversation, because again, this is the most important time right now to start planning strategy. If you haven't already, if you have, amazing, would love to talk to you more about that. But recovery and reopening is critical. And, you know, we talked about 5 steps, but they're different for any organization. So I would love to dig into some of that more. So please reach out to me. I'll talk to Atama about following up on some of the folks here as well. That's number 1. Let's chat. And you have a bowl of soup for some reason and not a coffee cup, but that's okay. We'll have soup over our chat. Follow Trove. So this is where you can follow us on all of our socials. We're very active on Instagram. Every week we do a tourism and travel update from one of our teammates. This week, our update is it's a video update. Our update will be about Expo, Dubai Expo, which starts in 2 days, which is the biggest business conference in the world. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, it was on Hawaii, like I mentioned. So every week it's different. We also post our blogs. We post a lot of social posts around our insights and reports. So please follow us on our channels if you have not already. And then stay tuned for more, not from Trove, but from SPTO, who does amazing webinars. I've been to one of them, phenomenal, and hope to attend more. And that's it. And then back to you, Atama, for any other questions.
I think that's all the time that we have for today. we're very grateful for everyone who's tuned in, and like to take this time to thank you, Danny, for great presentation, very informative presentation that you've executed today. And I thank everyone for attending and taking time off and attending our webinars. As I mentioned before, the recording will be available on our next Pacific Pulse newsletter, which is goes out on Wednesdays from the Pacific Tourism Organization, and also be on our social media. So please do follow us on our social channels. Links in chat. Yeah, unless, as Danny has mentioned, if his email address is on the screen there, and I've also put mine in the chat box. So if you do have any feedback or any questions that you'd like to ask Danny or I, please do email us. Yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for your attendance. You have a great rest of the week.
Hey, it was great talking to you, and thank you very much for the time, and appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Danny.